Welcome to Time with Death. This video is for informational purposes and in no way meant to glorify or condone violence. In today's video, we'll be discussing the murder of Jermaine Alexander Williams. Williams was shot and killed on Friday, February 26, 2016 at the intersection of Western Avenue and West 42nd Place in Vermont Square, according to LA County coroner records. Jamar Wilson was subsequently arrested and charged with the murder. The following is the evidence at trial. The incident that gave rise to these convictions involved defendant's participation in a retaliatory shooting of a rival gang member, victim Jermaine Williams, who died as a result of his wounds, and the victim's girlfriend, Ms. Elliston, who survived. Defendant Wilson was a member of a gang known as the Fruittown Brims. Kenneth Durden was defendant's big homie. On February 23, 2016, Mr. Durden was killed in Harvard Park, a stronghold for the Brims. Defendant later told police he was present when Mr. Durden was killed. A memorial for Mr. Durden was held at his grandmother's house 2 days after his death. Defendant attended the gathering and became emotional. Someone named Baby Nut called one of the men at the memorial service to go to a Buffalo Wild Wings restaurant located on South Crenshaw Boulevard. That evening, defendant received a message on social media warning defendant, quote, "Don't get caught up in no emotions about Ken Dog and hop in one of them cars and get caught up. Please don't. It ain't what we do. You got too much of a bright future ahead of you, homie. Think first." Defendant replied, "I respect that." These messages were apparently in reference to a plan to kill victim Jermaine Williams, a member of the Rolling 40 neighborhood Crips, in retaliation for Durden's death. Defendant apparently ignored the advice contained in the messages and instead went with several men to the restaurant. Montel Egan's was part of the group. Defendant knew Egan's had a gun. Defendant drove his white Infiniti to the Buffalo Wild Wings. The victim was at the restaurant with his girlfriend, Ms. Elliston. Defendant entered the restaurant and was inside for less than 15 minutes. Although he later told police he entered the restaurant to have a drink and talk with some women, surveillance video footage from the restaurant didn't show him order anything or drink or socialize with any women. The video showed the victim walk past defendant, but the two men did not interact. The prosecution's theory at trial was that defendant entered the restaurant to confirm the victim was inside so the group could prepare to attack him once he left. Video footage showed the victim drove away in his BMW with Ms. Elliston. Defendant's Infiniti followed, but the occupants are not visible in the video. Ernest Reyes, who was part of defendant's group, also followed defendant and the victim in a white truck. There was no video footage of the actual shooting. Defendant later told police that Egan's, who was seated in the back seat of defendant's car, fired a gun at the victim's vehicle. A witness was driving near where the shooting occurred. She said she heard a pop and then a black BMW hit her Honda Accord. Another witness was also driving close to where the shooting occurred. He saw 7 gunshots fired from the Infiniti, and he went to the BMW to help the victims as the Infiniti drove away. The witness found the victim unconscious behind the steering wheel. He had suffered multiple gunshot wounds and his breathing was labored. Ms. Elliston, seated in the passenger seat, was screaming. Police arrived at the scene less than 10 minutes later. The victim suffered 4 gunshot wounds, including 1 fatal wound to his back. Ms. Elliston suffered 2 gunshot wounds but survived. Police recovered 10 .40 caliber bullet casings at the scene. The BMW had multiple bullet impacts on it, including on the driver's side door frame, the hood, one of the front headlights, and the windshield. All of the bullet impacts were on the driver's side of the car. Police were later informed that a person who drove a white SUV that was seen in surveillance footage captured at the time of Mr. Durden's murder was a member of the Brims who had a gang moniker containing an S. Because defendant's moniker was Baby Stretch, he became a person of interest. Police then discovered defendant had purchased a white Infiniti FX35 in November 2015. Cell phone records placed defendant's phone in the vicinity of the Buffalo Wild Wings shortly before the shooting and in the vicinity of the shooting while it occurred. Records also show Egan's cell phone was at the murder scene. Police arrested defendant and placed him in a jail cell with Egan's. Defendant told Egan's, "They got my car." Egan's replied the police were faking it or trying to scare defendant. Egan's wanted defendant to be quiet. The police interviewed defendant twice. During his first interview, defendant admitted he had been at Harvard Park when Mr. Durden was killed, though he claimed the killing was not gang-related and denied owning or driving a car that day. When shown a picture of the white Infiniti, defendant claimed he had never seen or been inside the car. When confronted with records showing that the car had been registered in his name, defendant insisted he was not allowed to own a car because of his driving record and could not explain documents showing he had purchased the car. When confronted with evidence that his cell phone was near the Buffalo Wild Wings around the time of the murder, defendant again had no explanation. After the first interview, defendant's girlfriend, Ms. Green, told police that defendant owned a white Infiniti. Police showed defendant video footage of Ms. Green's statements and interviewed him a second time. Defendant then admitted he owned the white Infiniti. He said he got rid of the car because it was involved in a murder on Western Avenue. Defendant continued to deny that he went to Buffalo Wild Wings. Instead, he claimed that Egan's used defendant's car to go to the store while defendant's cell phone was in the car. Defendant eventually admitted he drove his Infiniti to the Buffalo Wild Wings. He claimed that he grabbed a drink and chatted with some woman inside the restaurant. He also claimed that when the shooting occurred, he was in Reyes' white truck because he knew Egan's was armed. Defendant said he saw Egan's fire a gun from the backseat of his car. Defendant claimed he didn't know why Egan's committed the shooting. The prosecution called gang experts, one of whom testified that the Buffalo Wild Wings was in territory claimed by the Black Pea Stones, a gang that was friendly with the Fruittown Brims. The Brims are a rival of the Rolling 40 neighborhood Crips. The expert also testified that if a gang member is harmed by a rival gang member, there would be an expectation that the harmed gang member's gang will retaliate. The LA County District Attorney charged defendant with the murder of Jermaine Williams, the attempted murder of Miss Elliston, shooting at an occupied motor vehicle, and being a felon in possession of a firearm. Following the trial, the jury convicted defendant Wilson on all counts and allegations. The court sentenced defendant to 32 years to life in state prison. Jermaine Alexander Williams was 33 years old at the time of death.